In this video, we're going to be considering more closely historical methods for the study of the history of Asian religions. While the epoch of European colonialism may date back to the expansion of the Iberian, Spanish, and Portuguese empires, particularly during the 16th century, followed by a period of missionization in the 17th and 18th century and the subsequent expansion of the Dutch, British, and French empires in the 19th and 20th centuries, it is important for us to understand that the post-colonial epoch is going to be just as important for our considerations in this class as well. This being said, in 1800, these empires claimed to control 35% of the world's surface. In 1914, if we use the US as an empire as well, then they control 84%, or claim to control 84%. Of course, you could dispute how much of these claims are real control, because of course, in the case of British India, once you get to the matter of how much is actually British control and how much is actually control of a subordinate elite organization of South Asians who are parrying for their own administrations in each locality, then you begin to see, well, control on a map doesn't really equate to control in real life necessarily. That being said, the colonial period is particularly brutal, and it's also going to introduce concepts from European, especially Western European cultures and American cultures that are going to intermingle with concepts from Asian cultures. And you see through this interaction the rise of the secular nation state during the colonial and post-colonial period, and also interjections of capitalism, being the market capitalism especially, not necessarily the American system or American ideas about capitalism, but actual capitalism. So what that means is that you have a class of people who make most of their wealth off of capital itself, not off of labor. So people in the United States will often use the definition capitalist as somebody who believes in capitalism, which is not actually the definition of a capitalist. Definition of a capitalist is somebody who makes most of their wealth off of money itself, off of capital investment itself. So, for example, Jeff Bezos would be a capitalist. President of the university, not a capitalist, probably, right? Professors, not a capitalist, still making most of their money off of salary, right? But Jeff Bezos, super wealthy folks, capitalists. So you're going to see capitalism sort of shaping Asian societies during the period in question, and then questions about the relationship with science that are going to shape people's understanding of cosmology. So, for example, in Buddhism, you might have debates about Buddhism and science, or is Buddhism itself scientific? Is Hinduism itself scientific? And we'll see these play out throughout the course. Now, historians tend to talk about the modern period or the modern era as predominantly the 20th century. And then you have this shift into late modernity in the contemporary era, contemporary specifically referring to the period when we are alive. During the late modern to contemporary era, you begin to see globalization, the interaction between trade and investment aided by technology, as well as the rise of the media. Now, this begins with newspaper and print markets and the rise of the public sphere in the 19th century. But then you also have the 20th century, the explosion of radio across the continent, as well as television eventually, and then the internet by the late 20th to early 21st century. Now, I just want to have you think about the impact of media coverage. There's a saying, no press is bad press, because any attention is going to increase name recognition. Well, I pulled this old clip, this old sort of visual evidence looking back at the 2016 election, so you can just look at the free media coverage of the various candidates. Now, taking politics out of the question, you could see that free media coverage has an impact, and weights it arguably has an impact on outcomes of elections. So that's something to think about in terms of free media coverage of religions as well, and how that might create, under the auspice of the phrase "no press is bad press," how that might create attention to various religious groups. We also have this notion of post-secularism, especially in religious studies, basically the persistence or resurgence of religious belief, also called re-enchantment. So the question becomes, what might re-enchantment look like? For our first little brainstorming exercise on what might re-enchantment look like, we'll have you look at a video of goddesses of disease in India, specifically in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you watch the video, I'll put the video also in the Moodle page here. Watch the short video. It's from Al Jazeera, an internationally renowned reporting network. And then just put your ideas about re-enchantment in the threads below.